Hey there, everybody. Pete Pardo here from Sea of Tranquility. Welcome to another episode of In the Prog Seat. As you can see here in the Zoom, we have assembled a pretty awesome panel to talk about the year 1973 and our favorite album releases from that year. A pretty stocked year across all genres. As you saw in the Hudson Valley Squares last week, we had all sorts of cool hard rock and heavy metal picks, or not quite heavy metal, because heavy metal wasn't really a thing in 1973, but heavy music, hard rock, classic rock. Well, today we're going to kind of switch gears here, of course, in the prog seat and talk about our favorite prog and fusion albums of 1973. Let's introduce everybody. We got Mr. George Lamy from Chicago, from up in Canada, Rick Labonte, all the way from Scotland. It's 1 o'clock in the morning or so for him. Mr. Stephen Reed. My fellow New Yorkers, we got Chuck Alvarez and Eric Porter. And then all the way from New Jersey, the professor of prog, Mr. Ken Golden from the Laser's Edge. Greetings, gentlemen.
Hey.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Hey.
So I'm assuming everybody, so we had to pick 5 for today. I'm assuming everybody at least had a list of 25 that they were kind of pulling from, right?
Mm-hmm.
Easy.
I'm just thankful that it's just in the prog category. Could you imagine with the $1 billion babies of the world, House of the Holy, and all the great classic
No
rock?
way, right? Yeah, there's no way.
It made my job a little easier.
That's why before I knew we were going to do this on here, we were doing it on Hudson Valley Squares last week, and I was going through the list of all of my favorites, and I'm like, holy shit, there's like 25 of them. And I'm like, how the hell am I going to pick from all these? And then I'm thinking, like, well, the Squares is more of a hard rock and metal show, right? So I said, I can get 2 episodes out of this. Great. I can leave all the prog stuff for next week, and I'll just do the heavier stuff for last week. So now this week, I had a shorter list to pick from, but still very tough because a lot of really good ones. So we're each gonna start with our number 5 and work our way back to number 1. We're gonna go Ken, Eric, Rick, Steven, Chuck, George, and myself, and then go back round and round till we get to number 1. So Mr. Golden, who is, I believe, over this way, according to my Zoom, you're going first. What do you got?
Me? I'm going first?
Yep.
All right. Well, so 1973 was a watershed year for prog. And as everybody knows, I like to take a different path. I like to take the road less traveled. So I'm going to do this a little differently. So I decided to create 2 lists. You got the more popular ones, the ones that are, carved in the Mount Rushmore of prog. And then the lesser known titles that I think are of equal quality, but they just didn't get the attention that they deserve. So I'll have an A pick and a B pick. And I'm not going to spend an enormous amount of time on the A pick, because we all know these records.
You ever notice every show we have someone who doesn't follow directions?
It's always me, and it's usually me, right? But it'll be quick. But I promise
you, or it's Steve Keeler on the Squares, or Rich Catino. There's one on every show. I don't know.
Well, I told my wife it's only going to be a 5-hour show tonight, so don't worry about it. So also I decided to share the wealth a little bit around the countries and styles, in case, like, in the future, if we ever do like a specific country ranking or something like that. So anyway, there's too many amazing releases. So
that's
here's
why we
what
call
I
you
got.
the professor.
All right. So my number 5 pick. Where the hell did I go with my window? Wait 1 second. I lost you guys. There you are. My number 5 pick from the softball list, what I call the softball list. Yes, Tales from Topographic Oceans. So to me, it's kind of like an imperfect masterpiece. Probably would have been condensed down to 3 great sides. So it kind of meanders a bit, and but I think the high points of the album are pretty fantastic. That's on the softball side. On the hardball side, my number 5 pick, Eloy, Inside. Okay, that was their second album. Frank Borneman, he took control of the band, and he kind of started to veer them into a space rock direction. The key elements of the band for Inside and for the follow-up, Floating, is keyboardist Manfred White-Sorka. I'm sure I killed his name. He concentrates on organ. There's no synthesizers, no piano, just a heavy organ. Frank still has, he has that heavy accent, but his vocal approach is kind of developing. He sounds a little bit like Ian Anderson in some places, but with a heavy accent. The album kicks off with a 17-minute Land of Nobody, and that takes you to like another world. Mm-hmm. And because of the heavy reliance on organ and guitar, kind of reminded of Deep Purple in a way. You got Future City, which is maybe the best song on the album. It's been often compared to Jethro Tull. Why, I'm not really sure, other than the fact that they do this radio vocal treatment to Frank's voice at one point. So it makes it sound a little bit like Aqualung. But for me, one of their best. And if you want to try Eloy, you want to get into the band, this is a good gateway for the band. And it's also interesting to hear how the band evolved over the years, because their sound changed. And they went from this hard rock prog sound to more symphonic to pure space rock. That's my number 5.
Yeah, I would say anybody who hasn't discovered Eloy and maybe doesn't like the kind of symphonic prog and the space rock stuff, the first 3-4 albums at least, Ken, I would say, are much more that heavy rock.
The first album isn't a great album. Frank kind of
the second and third are.
They call it the garbage can cover. Inside was the second album. This is really where you want to start. Floating, which came the following year, is cut from the same cloth, very similar to Inside. Then they had Dawn, Power and the Passion. They start to get more symphonic, more synthesizer, but still very accessible. And then they got, you have Ocean and Silent Cries, and they get into the whole space rock thing. For me, number 5, best album, one of the top 5 albums for 1973.
Great pick.
Nice.
Eric.
Good evening, gentlemen. How's everybody?
Good evening.
Good to see you, buddy.
Pete, I've watched a bunch of your album rankings, and I think you mentioned this probably in more than one episode, but I think what was interesting when I put this list together is I was thinking, what would I put together 10 years ago, 20 years ago? And I know this list is different based on what I've been listening to the past few years. And my number 5, I think, Ken, you just said this is an album I think I would recommend to people if they were trying to get into this artist. And I really just got into him about 10 years ago, and I'm nowhere near complete in terms of his catalog, but I'm going with Frank Zappa's Overnight Sensation. And I think this is like a greatest hits when you listen to it now. I mean, I've seen Dweezil probably 7-8 times. He plays pretty much, I think he did a tour of this album, but even then he plays most of these tracks. You've got Montana, Zombie Wolf, Dirty Love, I'm the Slime, Camilo Brillo. It's a short album, I think like 34 minutes. But I've really fallen in love with his music. And just like Ken said, for Frank, I would recommend this as something to start with. And I've got a lot to explore, but I still listen to this. I love this record. And there's a lot, like you guys have said in 1973, Frank wouldn't have been on my list 10 years ago, but he's on it now. So that's my number 5.
And that album is arguably from his greatest period ever, in my opinion.
Agreed.
I didn't even think of that album. It's amazing. It's amazing record.
How many good ones there are in this year. Good start. All right, Rick.
Okay, I take it we do have a couple honorable mentions at the end.
Oh yeah.
I don't want to play. I'm not going to do the A and B, but I will do this because this. I just want to mention it. I don't think this band gets mentioned enough. Badger, but it's a live album, being the first record, being one live Badger, and it gets away with because nobody heard anything. It's their first album. In fact, their second album called White Lady, and then the band disbanded. But I really like this record, being that, well, first of all, just so you know, we love that Yes Songs album, and they recorded at the Rainbow Theater. They were the opening act, and they recorded them. So John Anderson helped them release this the following year. So this was recorded in December 72 and released in 73. And I love it. It's great. I think it's great, pretty adventurous music. And, what was deceiving for me when I bought this is I thought it was an instrumental record because it doesn't say who sings. It says Tony, and it says all these people's names, Roy and all these guys, but they just say the instrument. And then till you hear the album, everybody sings, and they got a lot of good vocals in there. So I was also note to mention that they used a Roger Dean artwork, which is I think it's before Tony. Tony never saw Roger Dean artwork while he was in the band yet.
Hold that up, Rick, because that is a really cool cover.
Yeah, let me do that proper.
Come on, magician.
Yeah, look at that.
Oh, look at that magic.
Here we go. Yeah, that's a really cool snow scene. Yeah.
And and it's a good sounding live album for a first record too. So anyway, if you haven't got it, it's one of my favorite of '73.
And it's funny, I've had that CD for years and years and years, and it's somewhere lost in my collection. I haven't been able to find that in like 5 years. I'll stumble upon it one of these days, but
Did you look on the B?
yeah, it ain't there. And all my stuff is alphabetized, so I don't know. It's somewhere where it shouldn't be. That's what's kind of screwing me up. But I'll find it. It's here. It's here somewhere. So, all right, our center square, Mr. Reed.
Okay, so I'm going to start with a bit of Rick. Is where I'm going to start. This is The Six Wives of King Henry VIII. We're looking at Rick Wakeman's solo here, almost right at the start of his solo career. It was released in January of 1973. I think this is pretty much the defining moment of his solo career, as early as that. I can't think of many albums that better it that he's put out. It's probably one of my favourite 3 or 4 albums that he's been involved with. I think it's really that good. It's pompous and it's over the top, and that's exactly why I love it. But it's also nuanced. This is, it's not just Rick going for the throat and waving his cape in your face. Not that. I think he was caping it up too much at this stage, to be fair. And you get little cameos from lots and lots of people, but there's a few from the Yes family. You've got Bill Bruford, you've got Alan White, you've got Chris Squire. This is all about Wakeman, this album. I mean, his solo career is, to be fair, but it's really about his performance. It's really about his compositions. And that, to be fair, isn't something you can always say for all of the material that he's put out. There's been maybe too much of it over the years, but at this point, we're really bang on it. I mean, this went top 10 in the UK. I think it got to number 7 and around there, which, I mean, that shows how times have changed, because you just could not imagine that happening.
Not
For a
today.
long time after that. Yeah, definitely not today. Do you know? It maybe feels a little of its time, but yeah, it was released then, so why shouldn't it? Do you know, I still find a huge amount to enjoy here. And I really I love Rick Wakeman's playing, always have done. And I think this is one of his best. So yeah, that's my first choice.
And a good one.
That's his best album.
Yep, I say
Yeah,
the same thing
I
too.
think by a distance as well, to be fair.
That's a good album. I forgot about that too.
So, yeah.
All right, Chuck.
All right, well, I was going to be one of these guys that's going to go a little bit off kiltered, and so, I didn't want to become too predictable with my picks. 1973 had a lot of great albums, and this album, most of the time, is not usually known as a prog album, but it does get associated with American jazz rock, jazz pop. It's Steely Dan's second album, Countdown to Ecstasy, 1973 August, is my number 5 pick. There was some mighty fine playing on this album, and this is when they were still considered a band. Denny Diaz, Jeff Skunk Baxter, Jeff Hodder, Walter Becker, and then you also have Donald Fagen. The band was just smoking on this over here, and just has some of my favorite songs ever from this band. And my number 5 is Steely Dan's Countdown to Ecstasy, 1973, their second album.
It's a great thing about Steely Dan because you pretty much bring them up on almost any ranking show for any genre you do.
Yep.
They don't really fit anywhere perfectly. Right?
They really don't.
Yeah.
Not at all. That's my number 5.
Cool. All right, George. Knock him dead, baby.
Number 5, I go with my Scottish brother here,
Nice. Look at that.
Wakeman. Best tracks for me are the opener and the closer, a couple of Kathy songs.
That's my favorite.
Yeah. Also, the second tune is the song where they kind of cut it loose and go a little bit wild. But really, there's no bad tune on this album, and obviously, I don't think there's any question that this is the top Wakeman album.
Yep.
He probably looks back on it like, I never topped that, but yeah, pretty much. I'm sorry to say, but yeah, that's my
40 albums later, right?
Yeah.
More. I think it's closer to like 100.
You're probably right, Ken.
The Red Planet is the last one, right? He put out.
Red Planet was pretty good.
Yeah,
It was
I
good.
like
There've
it.
been some good ones.
Oh, no, he's had some pretty good albums out there.
Oh yeah.
I mean, I know a lot of people don't like it, but I always tell the story that Journey to the Center of the Earth was the album that got me into prog rock. I mean, I've told that story, I think.
I happen to like that quite a bit.
I love that.
I,
mean,
I also
I
have the
love it.
DVD of them doing that concert
Yeah.
live, and that was great.
What was good was, was it 10, 15 years ago? He remade it with an orchestra. He did a studio version of it. And that was much better than the original. It was really, really
It
good.
sound better, for sure.
Yes, it was. Yeah, it was a shockingly great sounding record.
Yes, it
So,
was.
yeah, what was a stinker was the Return to the Center of the Earth. That was, that wasn't good. He made a lot of bad records, but he did have some good albums.
Wasn't Ozzy on that? Did he have guest singers and stuff on that
Yeah,
one?
Ozzy is on that album.
That's what I thought.
And
Okay.
at least if nothing else, he asked Ozzy to do not just the Ozzy thing. So it's interesting.
Yeah,
You know, it was a good one. Like he had one called Retro that came out of nowhere, where it was instrumental. He's just playing all analog keyboards.
That was pretty good. Yeah,
That was a good record.
haven't
It was
heard
the
that.
one with Damian Wilson.
that was
was
okay too. Yeah.
mhm.
Was that out
Oh,
there?
he did a couple with the English rock ensemble, I think it was. Is that right?
Yeah, I mean, unfortunately, if it's got Ashley Holt singing, that's not exactly like a badge of honor. It's he was not a good singer, so
He's okay in small doses. I don't.
yeah,
I don't mind him on the Warhorse stuff, but
he was better with Warhorse.
yeah, I agree. Yeah. All right, my number 5. So I opted personally not to include live albums in my list, but you guys are more than welcome to do so. And one of the reasons being is because for my number 5, this band has 2 albums they released this year, and I might have gone with the live album, but then again, if I start doing that, I'm going to pick live albums from everybody. So I didn't want to do that. So I think Chuck knows where I'm going with this. So I decided to go with the studio album from the same year, Birds of Fire from the Mahavishnu Orchestra. I mean, one of the great bands lineups of all time.
Amazing.
Lachlan and Cobham and Hammer and Laird and all in the same, and Goodman all in the same band. I mean, sparks are going to fly. So many great songs on here. You know, Birds of Fire, Miles Beyond, Sanctuary, One World. I mean, the whole thing is great. Arguably as good as their debut. Probably one of the best 1-2 releases out of the gate from any band ever. But yeah, that's my number 5. Mahavishnu Orchestra. Great fusion band. One of my favorites of all time.
Somewhere, somebody's getting murdered.
My wife is watching the Mets game, and I guess they're doing some good stuff.
Yes.
She was never this passionate about baseball before, ever, till like the last couple of years.
Seems quite keen now, anyway.
Oh yeah.
My wife had to remind her which one is baseball, which one's football. You know? Is it my turn?
It is, Ken. Yes.
All right. All right, from the softball list, my number 4, Larks, Tongues, and Aspic. The first album with Bruford, Wetton, and Jamie Muir. Classic. I don't think we need to say a lot about it. It's one
My
of the
favorite
all-time
King
great
Crimson album. It's my favorite King Crimson album. Period.
It's the, you know, for that period, this is the one. That's from the softball list. Now I'm going to turn the universe on to an album that nobody knows. It's my number 4 from the hardball list. And you can look at me like I'm crazy. It's by Enrico Rava, and it's called Cacciapari.
Oh yeah, I got that one, Ken.
Yeah, you have that like you got a third nut.
Yeah, I had the alternative cover of that one. Yeah, looks remarkably like an ACDC album.
Eric, you'll grow a third eyeball in the middle of your head
There you
before
go. And I'll get this
before
back.
you'll get a copy of this. Unfortunately, this doesn't exist on CD. So here's the story with it. It was his second album. He's a great Italian trumpeter, very influenced by Miles Davis. This album was done for the MPS label in Germany, and it was released under the name of Rava, I guess more like a band name. And normally, you know, I wouldn't consider Enrico Rava as a jazz player, I wouldn't consider him for a prog rock fusion list, but Khachapari is very different. His trumpet work is just amazing, and it's the focus of the album. But the secret weapon on this album, I can't speak tonight, is the guitarist John Abercrombie.
Ooh.
And it's kind of unusual for a jazz album. He plays with distortion, and he has this sort of psychedelic energy that's just infused in the whole album. The rhythm section gets kind of funky, lays down these funky grooves. And then Rava gives Abercrombie all this space to solo, and his playing is totally treacherous on this album. You know, Rava's soloing, it's like smooth as glass, but you've got Abercrombie kind of weaving his way in and out and around, and it just elevates everything. You could hear it, you could hear it on streaming services. Used copies turn up rarely. If you have any interest in exploring like what I call electric jazz, early 70s jazz where everybody was plugging in, or, that whole jazz rock period, beginning of fusion, whatever you want to call what Khachapari is, this album might be your gateway drug. This is a very, very special album. And if you could listen to it, stream it, you want to hear it. And it's just, as I said, it's a shame that it just never came out on CD. And let me hold up the cover. Kind of a cool cover. Yeah, kind of neat. And go check it out. Khachapari by Enrico Rava.
I definitely want to hear that.
Mm-hmm.
You'll love it. I guarantee you will love it. It'll blow you away.
I like edgy.
I love Abercrombie. Yep.
Quite a bit.
Yep.
And this is when he was really starting out. 73. I mean, he went on. Rava signed with ECM after this, and he, I guess whatever it is you call ECM, you want to just call it, contemporary jazz, whatever. He kind of moved in that direction. But this album is really kind of eclectic, and he just kind of let Abercrombie do whatever he wanted, and he's just going off on the whole album. It's great.
What's the big Abercrombie album from that time? Is it like Timeless or
Timeless.
something?
Timeless, yeah.
Okay.
Timeless was 74.
74, 75.
Yeah, I think 74. That was him and Jan Hammer, and was Jack DeJohnette, I think it was.
DeJohnette. Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Cool.
that's my number 4.
All right. We'll be seeking that one out. All right, Eric, what do you got?
All right, my number 4. This is one that I've had for years, but it also sat on my shelf for years and has recently come out quite a bit. And I think this is the album where the band Return to Forever became Return to Forever. I know the previous ones, I had bought a few just on name and they didn't really click with me. But I think this is where the rock really came into the band. I think, is this Lenny White's first with them?
Yeah.
And this is always right, the Connors versus Di Meola, but I think Connors works here. He's really good. He's raw, different than Di Meola, but it works just the same. And I've listened to this a ton over the last year. So this one might not have been in my list a year or two ago, but it's there now. Him and the Seventh Galaxy, Return to Forever. That's my number 4.
My favorite from that band.
A lot of people like the Bill Connors version of the band better.
Love them. Love it.
A little different, a little more rock, I think. But
I never really liked Bill Connors' solo albums. They never did much for me.
The more he soloed, the more he started trying to sound like Alan Holdsworth, and then it just went downhill after that.
The album he's great on, Julian Priester, Love.
Love it.
You see him? He plays on the whole first side. He's basically playing with the Mwandishi band.
Mm-hmm.
And, it's real nice.
all right, Rick.
Okay, so my next one, this is the album that they actually start, almost like Eloy. This is the album that they get into prog, but they get even more further. Maybe 3 albums from now, they would even incorporate more fusion in the material. I'm talking about the band Argent and In Deep. This is where they started getting deep in prog a little bit. Even though some of the songs are accessible, They have songs where they like all of them are like 8 minutes, 7 minutes long, and somewhere in the middle there's a piano solo, something like Rick Wakeman or Keith Emerson would do, or an acoustic thing like they would do in Steve Howe movement. They've definitely been influenced by the band that you guys kind of mentioned so far, affecting their songwriting at this period. And they wouldn't have been on my list. There's a couple of albums that really bothers me that's why I have to mention an honorable mention because they got moved down. But this is one of those albums of all the albums that I'm picking today, are the newest one because I dug deep into Argent. I went, from in the order that they went, and I really like the growth of that band. It was unfortunately they stopped because I like to see what they would have done in 77, 78, 79. But anyway, so anyway, this is a good album. Obviously, the obvious song is God Gave Rock and Roll to You, and it has all the part money, those are things. But there's other songs in there that are definitely prog epic, something that only a prog fan can appreciate because that wouldn't be the stuff they play on the radio between those songs. But it's a really good album.
Yeah,
What's
that's
the name of the album again?
In Deep from
Oh, indeed. Okay, thank you.
In
Thank
Deep.
you.
This is one of those albums with 3 albums in one, so it's just a little circle thing right here.
yeah. Those Argent albums are really strong.
Yes,
I mean, he's such a great keyboard.
very adventurous stuff. The kind of stuff I'm hearing from you guys already.
All right, cool. All right, Stephen, back to you.
Well, in a kind of similar vein, I suppose, because you could argue that my next pick, well, I'm not a prog rock band, but I would suggest that Solar Fire from Manfred Mann's Earth Band is a prog album.
Oh, yeah.
And a great prog album. You know, they're not always a prog band. And when they became much more commercially successful, they probably left this kind of sound behind, you would suggest. There was still a hint of it. But this, to me, is the band at the proggiest. It's also at their best, in my humble opinion. This is their 4th album, and it's by far my favourite. It's a band I've got into a lot in recent years, and this, to me, stands really tall as their best album, sorry. It opens with Father of Day, Father of Night, which is a complete reinvention of a Bob Dylan song.
Mm-hmm.
It bears really no relation to the original at all, which to me personally is a good thing. But it's just such a great rearrangement. It is a phenomenal song, and it sets the tone for the whole album. There's an awful lot of it, in actual fact, that's instrumental, which is also a bit of an oddity in the catalogue. I just think that the band are absolutely on fire here. It's just such a strong collective. Manfred Mann on keys as always, Mick Rogers on
he's
guitar.
killer. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, isn't he? Isn't he just? And then you've also got Colin Pattenden on bass, and then you've got one of my favourite drummers of all time, Chris Slade on drums.
Mm-hmm.
And they're all allowed a little bit of time to shine, but it's all about the songs, and I just think that it's really good. The whole thing's a bit space themed. There's a little bit of a kind of loose concept and various things in there. But there's tracks like In the Beginning, Saturn, Lord of the Ring / Mercury, the Winged Messenger, and the 2-part Earth, the Circle that closes the album out. I love the fact that part 2 comes before part 1. It's one of those little quirky things that I like on an album. It's just a really great album. Had it on again today, and I just lose myself in it. So yeah, that's my choice number 4.
Good choice. I forgot about that one.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's me too. That is a really
That's an excellent album.
Are you guys hip to Manfred Mann Chapter 3?
No, do you know what? It's interesting because I recently was gifted from one of my daughters the box set that's got all of this catalogue in it. I've got most of it on vinyl, but I was gifted that. And then I was gifted the Manfred Mann 60s box, which is obviously a completely different thing entirely, but very interesting. And that joining section isn't in the collection yet, and I'm very intrigued.
For me, that I'm not much of a fan of Earth Band. I never really explored them too much. But the Chapter 3 band, which was like 1969 and 1970, they're great jazz rock albums. They have vocals, but they're really good, prog rock, jazz rock. And maybe you want to call it proto-prog. It's like 69, 70, you know, but
Kind of like those Coliseum albums a little bit, Ken.
yeah, cut from, if
Yeah,
you
I
like,
it. Yeah.
if you like that stuff, you'd like them, and they're available on CD. They've been reissued.
Yeah,
It's
that's where I'm going next. So it's good to hear that they're coming recommended.
they're really good. Yeah, they were released on Vertigo, so yeah, those definitely worth exploring.
Yeah, I will do that. Cool. All right, Chuck.
All right. I'm thinking about that album. All right. My number 4, which is from one of my favorite female singers of all time. What's it? I'm also very happy. I'm going to throw a little plug in for Kate Bush, but that's for another time. But anyway, it's from my favorite female singer. The band happened to be very successful here in the 70s in the US. And I was so happy that I got to see her a few years ago. It's the band Renaissance, Ashes Are Burning.
Yep.
The title track is just one of those amazing, beautiful tracks where you get to hear this lady with her angelic voice just kill it. And the band behind her is no slouch either. They have a fantastic bass player, great drumming, great keyboarding, but this band is just absolutely amazing. Can You Understand, Let It Grow, On the Frontier, The Carpet of the Sun, At the Arbor. And once again, the title track, just one amazing song. All 6 songs just kill it on here. Is this their best album? I would say, in my opinion, it is. But then, you can explore the rest of the album. But this is my favorite for them. 1973, Ashes Are Burning, Renaissance. This is my number 4.
One of the
Chuck,
great.
are you going to see them this fall?
I'm hopefully, like I said, September is always pretty bad for me because my anniversary is during that time. So, we usually tend to go away during that 2-week stretch. So we'll see if they're around at that time. Hopefully I'll get to see them then.
Yeah, if you haven't seen them, they're worth going.
They're awesome. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And I will say one of the greatest bass players of the 70s
ever,
Chris Squire.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Was there a more consistent band in the 70s than Renaissance?
Not too many. But they're so underrated. You still have people talking about all the other bands, but they never talk about Renaissance.
They were never popular in Europe.
Nope. Mm-mm.
They were popular in the northeast of the U.S.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
They go west of the Mississippi, crickets.
Yep. Mm-hmm. An amazing band.
Yeah. I mean, is that better than Scheherazade? Maybe not. You know what I mean? It's just, yeah.
Well, it's not a great stretch of albums.
Novella, Turn the Cards, which might be
Turn the Cards.
They're all great.
Yeah.
Yep. Prologue
is superb.
And Andy Powell playing on it.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Yeah. All right, where are we, George?
My number 4, I don't have a hard copy, so maybe somebody's got it. Semiramis, Dedicato a Fraz, part of the Pasta Prague scene. Shout out to our friend Sal Randazzo. He probably likes it. But for me, I know it's not one of the higher rated ones. There's many others that get talked up over it, but for me, there was always something about it that I don't know. I feel like it's a little less overtly 70s, got a little more of a modern twist to it, a little darker maybe. I don't know. I think they were one and done, unfortunately, but
done. Yep.
Yeah. Very odd album cover. I don't know who that dude is, but he's ugly. Yeah.
I used to own 2 copies of that album.
It's an amazing album.
It was an amazing album, and when I sold, if you knew what I sold them for, that's why I sold them. They were, that's on my honorable mention list.
Mm-hmm.
It's an amazing record.
Yeah.
A friend of mine's burnt that onto cassette tape for me. Amazing album. Mm-hmm. Wish I still had it.
Michel Zarillo, who was in the band, he went on to become like a big pop star in Italy.
Oh, really?
It's an amazing record, and the only reason why I didn't put it on my list is because it's too painful, because I sold those copies. That's the God's honest truth, because they became museum pieces. They were worth so much money. I was afraid to play them, so I sold them. And
you have a hard copy of that, Pete?
What's that?
You have a hard copy of that?
I have it on CD. Yeah.
Yeah.
I have it on CD, and yeah, it's a beautiful record.
Yeah,
It really
you know
is.
what? I completely forgot about it in this list. That might have even made my top 5. It's probably a top 5 or 10 Italian prog album of all time.
Absolutely. For a long time, that was my number one.
Yeah, it's really
It's an amazing album, man.
hitting myself for getting it. Ugh, geez.
I said I have it on cassette. I don't think I even have it anymore, man, because I used to play that a lot for my buddies if they haven't stolen it or something.
I bought it years and years ago on CD, either from Ken or from Greg Walker, and I remember even then it was kind of expensive. We're going back to like the 90s, I think, mid 90s. Yeah. All right. So I am going to pull a Pardo here because silly me forgot that one. And also, I mean, Eric, you might as well hold up your last pick because I don't know how I spazzed and forgot about him in the Seventh Galaxy. So I'm going to do a 3-way tie for my number 4 between that, Jethro Tull, A Passion Play, and the Semiramis. So now I get them all. I squeeze them. See, I could cheat too. Ken, you know.
Sure. Absolutely.
Your show.
It's your show, man. You do as you want.
Yeah. But that Return to Forever kicks ass.
Yep.
Totally amazing. The Semiramis is one of the best Italian prog albums of all time. And this is a really great album too. It's kind of like the younger sibling to Thick as a Brick, because it kind of takes a similar approach with the one, long song broken up into 2 sides. And it's not quite as amazing as Thick as a Brick. It's a little more eclectic, a little more avant-garde, but I still love it. I think it's just really, really cool. And I even love like the Chateau de Disaster, the original version of it, which is on that, also on the box set, which is the original version of A Passion Play. And it's very different. And it comprises like stuff that you hear on the album that would come afterwards, and very, very cool. But yeah, Passion Play, 3-way tie for me for number 4, Semiramis, Jethro Tull, and Return to Forever. So there you go.
Hey, Pete, that might be a good topic at some point.
Like a comparison of the 2.
contrast.
And actually, Eric, it would be a comparison of the 3, because the version that's on the Passion Play box set is actually the version before that, not touched up like they did on the Nightcap one.
Okay.
They added a lot of flute onto the Nightcap thing and changed some of the arrangements. So all 3 are very different from each other. So yeah, that might be something worth investigating at some point. So, all right, back to Ken. No more cheating for me, I promise. That's it.
Oh, George Semiramis, that was painful. All right, so number 3 for my softball list. We talked about this so much. Genesis, Selling by the Pound.
Yep.
Is it the best Genesis album? Maybe. If it's not this or The Lamb, I change every time I play one or the other. But
Not Nursery Crime though, right, Chuck?
I played Nursery Crime this year.
I'm never gonna let you forget that. You know that, right?
Oh man.
So on my hardball list, I'm going out of order here. This is a little obscure. First album from a Japanese band, Cosmos Factory.
Yeah, I've heard of them.
An Old Castle of Transylvania. So also self-titled. It depends, and I never owned it on vinyl. I was never rich enough to own it on vinyl. It was their first album. It was their best album. They made 4 albums. The first 3 were prog. Then the 4th album is called Metal Reflection, and just kind of finds them doing kind of like bad heavy metal, hard rock. It's space rock with this very dark twist to it. You hear a lot of Pink Floyd in their sound, but there's a lot more variety of keyboards. There's a lot of Mellotron. The guitar player, Hiroshi Mizutani, he steals from the Robert Fripp playbook left and right. I mean, it's fantastic. The vocals are in Japanese, and it's a little bit of a distraction, but there's really long instrumental passages. The Old Castle of Transylvania suite is it's an 18-minute piece that's split into four parts, and it's just total monster all the way through. The keyboard sounds are kind of like somewhere like between Richard Wright and John Lord, and then you got Mizutani's doing like this laser beam guitar, just kind of transport you off to another planet. Just an amazing record, and if anybody wants to sell me a copy on vinyl, I'd be interested. Great record. Yeah, actually, Journey with Cosmos Factory was very good. And I think, was it self-titled? What was the other one? I'm forgetting the name of the other one. But first 3 albums, very good. Old Castle of Transylvania, Cosmos Factory. That's the best one. That's a killer.
Cool. And once again, everybody will be posting our picks in the comments below after the airing of tonight's show. So be on the lookout for that. All right, Eric, back to you.
My number 3, Gentle Giant in a Glass House. Exactly. Starts and ends with the glass breaking, and kind of interesting. I think they were in a transition period here. I know this is the first album without Phil, brother Phil. I also believe they lost their record contract in the US, right? Because this was an import only, I think. I've got it on WWA Records, and I think they were with Columbia. I'm not sure about that.
In the US, they were with Columbia. In Europe, they were with Vertigo.
Okay. And I think, Pete, this was the perfect line. You brought it up a couple of weeks ago when we were discussing Gentle Giant. They always sound like Gentle Giant, but every record sounds different.
Yep.
This one, I always found this one to be very different.
My favorite Gentle Giant.
From the early catalog, there's a ton of instrumentation on here that really stands out versus, they've always mixed stuff in, but there's a ton of vibes on this, on I think Inmate's Lullaby and Experience, I think. Violin comes out, which I always love hearing the violin from Ray. And this is one I go back to all the time. And as much as I listen to their catalog, this is probably the one I pull out the most. So that's my number 3, In a Glass House from Gentle Giant.
Great choice. Yeah, it's when it comes to Gentle Giant, for me, I always have a hard time picking my number 1. It's usually a rotating list that includes that and Freehand and Octopus and Three Friends and Power and the Glory, and they always kind of rotate.
Interview.
Yeah,
They're all good.
Yeah, they're all great actually. Yeah,
great.
So yeah. All right, Rick, what do you got? Number 3.
Okay, so one of the neck band was a book discovery, actually. A book called The Rolling Stones Illustrated a History of Rock and Roll. And I got this when I was a kid, and I wanted to keep it. I got it from the library, so I just paid the overdue charges, and I kept the book. It's a thing called Art Rock and Prog Rock chapter, and they talked about Rick Wakeman in a band I knew about, yes, at this point, in a band called the Straubs. And then they put out albums after that. And so I just went on a gamble because of what I read to buy this when I saw this on a cassette, and ultimately I had to get on CD and album. But obviously the 1973 Hero and Heroine, I think it's an amazing record. I just love it. It gave me the same vibe I had when I listened to King Crimson in the Court of the Crimson King, the way Autumn starts off with that, eerie, synthesized music with the you call it Moog or Moog, whatever you want to call it, but the synthesized stuff and just ear candy stuff for a kid with the Walkman walking down the street, hearing this album for the first time. So, and it left a major mark on me. It's still my favorite record, even though I like Ghosts after that and I like a few of their albums. But this was my gateway, and it's still my favorite one. This is a great 1973 when Prog was king, folks.
Yep. Brilliant album.
Did he just admit to a felony? Stealing from the library?
Oh,
No, I paid overdue charges. I'm free.
Rick, the statute of limitations.
Back then, you
probably
didn't have Amazon. You couldn't find books like this. So it's a encyclopedia.
State Library will be calling you tomorrow, Rick.
That's right.
Good pick, Rick. I love that one too.
That's a great Rick.
Yep.
All right, Stephen, back to you.
Okay, so my 3rd choice is, it's an iconic album with iconic artwork. Here we go.
Tubular Bells.
This was Mike Oldfield's debut. He was 19 when he put this out. It's Tubular Bells for anyone that doesn't know. I mean, everyone knows. And this is an incredible piece of work for someone Oldfield had done stuff prior to this, but that's on their debut. It's really out there. It's daring. And yet, it's a little rough around the edges when you go back and listen to it now. I don't necessarily think that it's as cutting edge now as it was back then. But there's an incredible amount of energy on this album. And it was created, if you believe all the stories, very piecemeal, all these little bits put together, and spliced and all the tape was, drop-ins and various things. But there's an incredible vibrancy to it. It sounds really on the edge all the time. It's really got a flow to it, but at the same time, it's really quite jarring. I mean, obviously, it became famous for its use in The Exorcist, and it didn't take off, fun enough, until 74 rather than 73. It was a bit of a flop when it came out, and then it just absolutely exploded. It was in the UK top 10 for a full year, which there's not many albums out there can say that. But yeah, it's something I really like to go back to now, but you have to kind of listen to it in context a little bit, I think, because some of the albums that we're all talking about tonight can still sound remarkably current. I don't think this does, but I think that's quite endearing about it as well, because I don't think you could have made this album at a different time. But it's an album I go back to on a regular basis, and I'm never bored by it. I always seem to find something else where you kind of, oh, wow, they were doing that there and this there. It's a great album. So yeah, Tubular Bells is my number 3.
Nice. Mhm.
Very cool.
It's coming up with some great picks, man.
Ooh, we are. All
You know,
right.
he kept trying to make a better album than that.
Mhm.
You know, he kept trying to improve it. He really had.
That's the problem with doing it right out of the gates, though, isn't it?
Yep. Yep.
Got to follow it with something, and you end up doing that kind of Jar did the same thing. You make the same album with the same name and call it Part 2, and then you reimagine it and doing it a different way. It's a milestone, but it's not at the same time.
Nope.
So difficult.
Yep. All right, Mr. Chuck.
Mm. I'm good. Well, this pick is not going to make Pete too happy, but
Oh boy.
it's still one of my favorite albums. You know, it's it's from the group Magma, Mechanic Destructic Commando.
Now I know why you hummed and paused for a second there.
Well, it's like he didn't want to have to say this pick.
You know,
right.
I'm not doing this as a joke or anything. This is just like one of the many albums that I knew that many here wouldn't have picked, and I didn't want to rehash any of my old. Nice.
He's still trying to give away that belt buckle. See that?
This album, it has its vocals and so, but in comparison to other albums that came after this, this album is not as jarring as it is. Maybe vocally it can be, but they've had much harsher albums, and their live album, is where you get to hear them as a live ensemble and their vocals, and it's really very intense. This album just continues to just go onward and so metaphylically, and so then all of a sudden it just continues to flow the way it does, and then it just starts getting harsher and harsher and harsher until it gets to the very last song. I'm not even going to butcher the song, so the name title and so, but the very last song is where you get to hear their influence of Ornette Coleman and John Coltrane, and then the vocals, and it's I can understand why good old Pete is just not too happy about it, but it's still one of my favorites. Magma's Mechanic Destructive Commando. What's that from 1973? My album.
Most people pick that as their favorite Magma. I mean, it's I don't know.
That's not an easy. It's not an easy album.
It's not. Mm-hmm.
It's funny, Peter, because I was on Twitter just today. People were asking what's on the UK connection at the weekend. Bit of self-promotion here, and I said, "Oh, we're covering the catalogue of Magnum." And the amount of people that came on below and went, "Is that band that Pete really hates?" Become a thing of legend.
I'd rather have that bowl of ramen that Steve Feynman.
Oh man!
Thank you, Chuck.
You're welcome, man.
All right, George.
My number 3, another difficult album probably for a lot of people, but Birds of Fire. I was in kindergarten then, so I don't know, but I'm guessing that probably a lot of people doubted that this would be on the level of Intermounting Flame, but they pretty much, doesn't sound like it, but it's right there. The quality across the board is right there with that album, and cornerstones of a genre, basically. There was stuff before it, but I mean, they're the framework for everything that came after it, and everybody owes them a debt in the genre. So I'll say Birds of Fire.
Yep.
And you are 100% correct. It doesn't sound anything like Intermounting Flame.
No.
Very different.
So, well, Intermounting is like edgy. That one is more polished, but yet it's still just as brutal.
There's a funk factor going on.
Yep.
Birds of Fire on a few tracks
Yep.
too. It's kind of cool. All right, my number 3, In a Glass House. For all the
Yep.
reasons that Eric said, I love it. It's a top 3 Gentle Giant album for me. Some days it's number 1, some days it's number 2. I just think it's really great, very daring. Not an easy listen, even though there are some songs that are really well put together and memorable. I think along with perhaps Acquiring the Taste might be their most difficult listen to the uninitiated. Just as Butch Jones, I gave him this as a album homework assignment a couple weeks ago, and he was like, I don't get this at all. Everybody's like, you should have gave him Freehand. I'm like, that's too easy. Yeah, I love it. And very, very cool creative album. These guys were from another planet, and that's my number 3.
That's their best sounding album as well.
Oh, it sounds amazing. Yeah, 100%. Yep.
If I'm not mistaken, I think it's their longest album too.
Might be.
I think it's their longest album. I think it's like they're close to 40 minutes.
Yeah, which
Everything
is long
else-
for them.
Mhm.
Yeah, I'm amazed. Their early albums are really short.
Yeah, 31, 34 minutes, 33.
Yeah, but a lot going on in that.
A lot.
Oh yeah,
Mhm.
they pack a lot into that short time. Yep.
No doubt.
Yeah. All right, Ken, your next 2 picks.
All right. All right. From the softball list,
Yes.
Jose Rosenbach, Sarah
Oh,
Foster.
beautiful. Mhm.
Is that really a softball?
I was going to say, how does that make a softball list?
Wait, you don't know what's my hardball
No, we
pick?
don't.
Exactly.
No.
I'm surprised you have a copy of that. It's so
Yeah.
hard to find.
That's the Japanese. I sold my Italian pressing.
Of course.
It was too. The Italian one was worth too much. I couldn't keep it. Once these albums become museum pieces, you're afraid to sell. You're afraid to play them. It was so valuable. I wouldn't even show it to people, literally, because I was afraid to pull it off the shelf. And I put wear on the cover. It was getting ridiculous. I got like over $2,000 for that. For original Italian.
It's a great album.
It's a great album.
Not the best sounding album, but it's a great album.
But you know what? That 7 Seas pressing from Japan sounds really nice. So, and that was they were a one and done band until they reunited. I don't know, some year, not that many years ago, and they made some kind of half-assed albums and nothing special. Great, just one of the great, keyboard albums. Piccarati. Never heard from that guy. I don't know what he did afterwards. Great record. But that's on my softball list. On my hardball list, something I don't own. I don't own on vinyl. Metamorphosis, Inferno.
Oh yeah.
So Metamorphosis, some of you guys might have seen them at Nearfest when they reformed. Inferno was their second album, and there were 2 particular talents of the band that really stood out. The vocalist Jimmy Spitaleri. He was one of the top vocalists in Italian prog history, probably only bettered by Francesco Di Giacomo. Kind of, had a sort of a similar operatic style as Francesco. I don't think he had quite the range, but he had a lot of control, a great singer. And the other notable member was the guy who was really behind the band, the keyboard player, Enrico Olivieri. He used a lot of Hammond organ, Moog, and piano, and his overall style was very much like Keith Emerson. It's a concept album based around Dante's Divine Comedy. It's classically influenced prog, and kind of a cursory listen. You would compare them to ELP because of all that keyboard work that will remind you of Emerson throughout. But that's only one of the facets of the band. I mean, because with Olivieri singing, with Spitaleri singing, he was, he just matched the music just perfectly. Long instrumental passages, never gets boring. Lots of fantastic solos from Olivieri. There was a guitar player, but he doesn't really do a hell of a lot. He's not, it's all about the keyboards. And then when the vocals kick in, there's no letdown at all. It's kind of like one part Bonko, one part ELP, and then they were like a one and done band sort of. Oliveri had planned on doing that. This was going to be the first album of a trilogy, and 31 years later, he put out the second part, and then 12 years later, he put out the third part. And the other two weren't as good as the first one, but they were actually still pretty decent, and they gave a great performance at Nearfest. That was my number 2 from the hardball pick.
Nice. Two great albums that you picked there.
I mean, to me, really, honestly, that Museo Rosenbach could have been a coin toss. Could have gone either way.
What an album, man.
The only reason why I did that about Museo Rosenbach, because I talked about it before. I didn't really want to rehash whatever he talked about. So,
Both great picks.
Thank you,
Eric.
Well, speaking of rehash, Birds of Fire is my number 2. I think you guys, between Pete and George, said everything. Violin and guitar is magic to my ears. So, and this is another one that wouldn't have been on my list probably a few years ago, but is now. I did see that it actually was number 15 in the charts in the US in 73. So people were listening at that time. And the last with the original lineup, I believe, McLaughlin, Laird, Cobham, Hammer, and Goodman.
Yeah, last studio album. Yep. Cool. Rick.
Okay, well, this is my probably be my second favorite album from this band, and it's probably my favorite with Peter Gabriel as a vocalist. It is "Selling England by the Pound." Trick of the Trail is my favorite, but this is my second, and because of how great it sounds. I mean, I love all the songs and all from Foxtrot on, and they're a special album to me. But sonically, this is so wonderful for me. Like, I just wonder how they skipped, even when you talk about the album The Lamb afterward, doesn't it sound as good as this and The Trick of the Tail when it comes to me, the way they produced the record. But anyway, I love this. I got a lot of fond memories of this. I don't need to get into any particular song because we all know how epic this album is. But it's definitely one of the, let's say 20 years ago, wouldn't have been in my top 5. But over the years, it grew to be one of those, iconic albums that I have to get at least in every 3 months, play it, since it's been in my life. So anyway, number 2 for me.
Selling England by the pound. Stephen.
Okay, so I'm going to go for another band that probably are not prog throughout the whole catalogue, and arguably are only really prog on For Your Pleasure. This is Roxy Music, for anyone that doesn't know. This is just a great album. It's interesting, Peter, because you and I did a ranking the albums of Roxy Music a while ago. A band I've always really liked. And since we did that ranking, I've gone back to this album again and again and again. I just think it's absolutely phenomenal. It sounds ridiculous. It's huge. This is a sort of album where you think, how was this huge? Do you know, how did this break big? Because it doesn't make a great deal of sense. Eno's still in the band at this time. He's just about to leave and say, see you later, thanks very much. But his presence here changes so much of what's going on.
Yep.
It just picks it up and stretches it and pulls it and takes it into areas that nobody else was doing, not for me anyway. But then you've got tracks like Additions of You and the guitar work from Phil Manzanera, the sax work from Andy Mackay. It's just
the drumming of Paul Thompson.
Oh yeah, absolutely. This is a band on fire, you know, and they really seem to be testing their own boundaries. How far can we take this? But there's still a sheen there. There's still an accessibility. There's still a way in. You can still have hits on here, do you know? And it's a really great mix. It's like a fantastic concoction. And it really has been, I mean, I've had this album for years, but it's been a recent rediscovery of mine. And if you'd asked me 2 years ago, this probably wouldn't even have featured in my honourable mentions. But it's getting taken out at least once or twice a month now, and I just can't get enough of it. It's a fantastic album. And to me, it's Roxy music at their best. And the more I listen to it, the further it kind of rises above what can be a peaks and troughs catalogue, but the peaks are very high. So For Your Pleasure is my number 2.
Very cool.
I've
Love
mentioned
hearing that,
album.
Stephen, too. I'm sorry, Chuck.
No,
Go.
no, please, Eric, please.
I just like hearing that where you said it's an album that might not have been there before. And now, I mean, I love when that happens.
It's still about the discovery, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, this is great to go back to albums that you've known forever and love and just get that kind of familiarity and pleasure with. But there's still that excitement of finding new bands and new albums, but new albums from old bands, do you know what I mean? That you're kind of like, well, it's new to me, or it's something that's sat in the collection for a long time that you think, yeah, I quite like that. And then there's no rhyme or reason to it. You take it out, you put it on, and it just clicks in a way it hasn't before. And you think, wow, what have I been missing for?
I found doing the ranking the album shows does that to me quite a bit, because you're going and you're re-listening to certain albums, you're listening to whole catalogs again to get ready to do the show, and then you wind up like revisiting certain albums that you really haven't listened to a hell of a lot in recent memory, and you're like, oh, that's better than I remember it. And then all of a sudden your love affair with that kicks up high gear.
I do have a tendency, I think, normally to pick out that's the 2 or 3 albums by that band that I love. And you think, well, I'm going to go and listen to that band. You tend to take those same albums out and you neglect what's sitting round about it. So sometimes it's nice to kind of have that catalyst to go and think, actually, I need to listen to this, not just that one today. And you do, and that the journey through a band's discography is often fascinating. And yeah, sometimes you knew it, and sometimes you kind of, oh wow, I didn't really realise that's the kind of path that they took through the music. It's very seldom just a straight line.
I love the live version of the In Every Dream Home a Heartache on Vivo. Phil Manzanera to me is like one of the most underrated guitar players.
He's such a great guitarist. I talk about him ad nauseum. I love him very much. You know, just to go further on with that album, you know, it's an album that I've spoken about a few times on this channel. I love Roxy music. They're one of my top 10 favorite bands of all time, regardless of genre. That's my favorite Roxy music album as well. What's it? You know, the side 2, which is the Bogus Band, and the title track, and the track in between is very edgy. You know, and then, you know, very edgy stuff there. You know, if people ever doubted how prog they were, and so that second side, you know, especially from the home, for every home, home dream, forgive me. You gotta forgive me, you gotta drink a little bit more water.
Every dream home a heartache.
Thank you very much. From that song onward, and so you get to hear the edginess. But there's a lot of great songs on there. You know, Beauty Queen. You know, you listen to a song like that, and you're like, you think that this is like a haunting Genesis song, and so way it sounds. But you know, Brian Ferry was of a totally different different type of writing style. And so, you know, even David Bowie, thought very highly of him, you know, although they were sometimes rivals and so, but Roxy Music, that band right there, you know, and that album is perhaps their most edgiest. And, you know, the band was never the same after Eno left, although Eno always said that Stranded was their best album, which is the album that follows it.
It's funny you mentioned the live album there as well, Ken, because I love that live album.
It's a superb album. I wish it had more tracks on it.
I wish it had better sound, but
yeah,
it's a great. It's not. It's kind of a murky recording.
It's a bit murky. I quite like the murkiness. I know that's a double negative because that's not really what you're looking for. It's got such an atmosphere.
But it's got a lot of energy to it, you know.
It's one of those.
There's a lot of tension on the record.
Yeah, and even the way that it finishes with that kind of echo at the end, you think, oh, I wish I was there. I want to be there right now.
Well, Pyjamarama and Pyjamarama sounds awesome live, and Out of the Blue, it sounds just as fantastic as well. you know, especially the Eddie Jobson's
Who?
what's that solo.
I managed to avoid that.
See, Anthony, we're thinking about it all the time.
All right, guys.
Are any of you going to see them?
I'm thinking about it because
Yeah, so
it's
am I.
coming up soon. So I'm thinking because they're going to be in Madison Square Garden at the end of the month. So I'm
That's-
thinking about going.
That's really weird to me because, you know, they were never that popular here.
It's funny.
They
but-
never could. Back in the day, they could never play Madison Square Garden.
No, not
Never.
at all.
I don't understand why they're booked into Madison Square Garden.
But they're selling. You know, it's selling here.
And I assume it's going to be like it's the farewell tour.
Yeah,
Yeah, I
I
think
hope,
they're
I
saying
hope
this.
so.
Is Paul Thompson playing?
They said he is, but I was surprised by that. You know, because
I
I
didn't
know
know
that
he
he
could
had
play anymore.
Yeah, same here, because I know he had knee replacement and his hips bothering him. So we'll see how that goes. Mhm. All right, guys. My number 2, you know, what's from this one over here? Hasn't been mentioned yet. It's from a great band. Probably one of the best Canterbury bands of the generation. Hatfield and North's debut album.
Oh, yeah.
You know, the Canterbury scene had some amazing bands and a lot of musicians that went from band to band to band to band. But you know, you just can't go past this album. It's argued whether or not this one or the second album is their best albums. But I take both of them. I think they're both amazing. You know, there's just nothing but amazing tracks on here. At least on this one over here, have 17 songs on here, and you can pick any of these songs and they'll just jive very well with me. Fitter Stroke Has a Bath. All these crazy names. that was whatever they were smoking at the time, coming up with these names. But my number 2 is the debut album from Hatfield in the North. Hatfield in the North is my number 2, 1973.
Nice.
Mhm.
All right, George.
Number 2 is Billy Cobham, Spectrum. It's a lot of genius stuff about this.
Olin.
That these songs are even like Mahavishnu broke up because Goodman and Hammer and Laird, they wanted to songwriting input in the band, and McLaughlin was holding off on that. And Billy Cobham was the one guy who was like, nah, that's okay. He knew he was going to unleash. And then he goes out and gets just the exact right sidemen. I mean, everybody talks about Bolin and Jan Hammer, but
Ron Carter.
Joe Farrell's the secret weapon on here.
Yep. Mhm. He kills it on there.
Yeah, the flute solo on Spectrum, and sax solo on Lay List, just incredible. And yeah, Quadrant 4, is there a better way to start an album or start a whole career, actually?
Yep.
A whole solo career. So yeah, for me, it's just actually the song I like the least is the most everlasting song, which is Stratus. So it's a decent song, but in this company, for me, it's on the lower end, but still a great album. Spectrum.
Well, Ron Carter kills on there too, man.
Oh, Dan is great. Yeah.
Oh, he's just amazing, man.
All right, my number 2, Selling England by the Pound.
Mhm.
Everything Rick said and everybody else said, amazing. Great songs. It sounds great. You know, and any album that's got Battle of Ebbing Forest and Dancing with the Moonlit Night is just, got to be on this list.
Earth the Fifth.
Yeah. I mean,
The Cinema Show.
yeah.
Yes.
Top to bottom, it's great, right?
Said I wasn't gonna start listening to songs, but I knew it. Hard not to. Right?
It's hard not to, yeah. So,
I listened to it today.
it holds up, right? You can listen to it any day.
It's funny. I made lunch for a friend from the who's in the audio business.
Yeah, we
You
saw
know.
Ken.
Oh
We saw
man,
I
him.
love Jim.
yeah, sure,
And-
sure. Mhm. Oh,
Yep. And he
fascinating.
and the first thing he had never been here, he'd never been in my listening room. And the first thing he asked me, he said, I'd like to hear at Classic Records pressing is Selling Them by the Pound. And I put it on and just said, this is the best version I've ever heard.
So you gave him a bib, you handed him a couple ribs, and put this album on.
He powered, dude. Let me tell you, he powered. He was powering those ribs.
Yeah,
They came out. They were mighty.
They look
They
delicious.
look good.
They were good. I'll be having them for lunch tomorrow.
there you go.
Nice.
You guys are jealous, I can tell.
2 months. 2 months.
Yeah, I'll do it. I'm going to do it. Is it
All
my
right,
turn?
Ken, you're number one.
My number one. So,
Number one.
from the softball list, the greatest album ever recorded in the history of man, Brain Salad Surgery by Emerson, Lake and Palmer, my all-time favorite album. Nobody can dispute it. Just a complete tour de force, and for me, the epitome of what progressive rock is a potential could have been in 1973. It's for me the perfect balance of technology and emotion, and I love it to death.
Power.
And power. It's to me, this is the masterpiece. That's from the softball list. From the hardball list, there was just so many to choose from. My honorable mentions are ridiculous. So I went with this one. Agitation Free, second.
Yeah.
You know, I'm in the krautrock mood because we were talking about krautrock last week. So I don't know. Is it krautrock? Is it space rock? Is it just plain prog rock?
It is
The
kraut
second
rock.
album. Yeah, well, the second album, it's a bit different from Malesh, which is the first. But for me, it's kind of on equal footing. Which one's really better than the other? It doesn't have that ethnic vibe that Malesh has. There's a bit of a slight change in the lineup. They swapped out guitar players. I think one of the guitar players was having issues with drugs or something. So Stefan Dietz, I think, came in. So it's the two guitar players. You got that, wishbone-ash twin guitar thing happening. Excuse me. Michael Honig's keyboards take on a little bit more influence. It's got a little more emphasis. You got a little more of a Pink Floyd sound going on underneath. One reviewer that I read compared them to the Allman Brothers Band. There's, it is in the sense because there's two guitar players and it has like this sort of loose jam feel, but it's not music from the southern part of the U.S. It's from another galaxy altogether. And it's a masterpiece of an album. Agitation Free, second. If you like Malesh, you'll like this too, but for different reasons. It's not the same.
Yeah, I agree. Great album.
Yeah, that was my. As I said, I could have picked almost anything off my honorable mentions, but went with this one.
All right, Eric.
Well, I'm going to play the role of the anti-Ken, and I'm going to throw two softballs. I couldn't leave this off, but maybe the difference will clarify things. The first one is an album that I love, but I probably will never have to listen to again. And so I'll be the poster boy for the softball on this one, but I haven't listened to that album in years. I don't even know if I'd put it on again, but I don't know that it can be it can't be mentioned in the best of 1973.
Yep.
And I'll keep it short because this one has also that is my number one. And this is an album, like Rick said, this goes on very often, just as whether it's just to hear for the fifth and bask in that or to listen to the whole thing. But I do play Selling England quite a bit. And that is my number one for 1973.
I always say that that's the best that the five band sounded. It's an excellent sounding album. What's it? Phil Collins, Mike Rutherford, the rhythm section just slays on there. Sounds perfect.
Their best songwriting too, I think.
Yep.
Yep.
Why do people rag on Dark Side of the Moon? What's wrong with Dark Side of the Moon?
Overplayed.
It's a great album. Overplayed.
It is the softball. I think it's at least in the US, it's the radio abuse. You've heard those songs.
We heard it to death for sure.
Right.
It's like Aqualung.
Yeah, we've talked
Can't
about
deny
it.
it's
Great
great.
album.
You can't deny it's great.
Right.
Yeah. All right, Rick.
Okay, I'm sharing two albums, but not to take the number one spot. I just want to say this is still my favorite live album of 1973, Yes Song, and Uriah Heep 73. Those two duke it out. But my favorite album, and I have to pick it, and for the same reason Eric just said, Dark Side of the Moon, man. It's the iconic. It was the reason I got into prog. It was my gateway. I mean, you don't start feeding babies meat and potatoes. You start with pablum or formula or milk, right? You couldn't get to the diet that we got into without having that mind expansion of Pink Floyd. And being that they're so popular, it gave you that opportunity to get on that kick. So, Dark Side of the Moon, I don't grab that album. Like I said, Animals was my favorite because why? It wasn't the one that's been radio played to death, probably. But you know what? I've seen Roger Waters, I've seen Pink Floyd, I've seen David Gilmour. They all did this album. You think I have enough of that? No. If they will go on tour again doing this Dark Side of the Moon entirely, you damn right I'm getting a seat. So this album was very important to me. It was pretty much... not only being progressively, I know we don't need to talk about everything, but it's not only the band is great, but lyrically progressive, right. The idea they're using tapes and looping, which is so common today's music today, of looping and music around like they did. They did so many groundbreaking things, and it got them popular, and to the point where they were more accessible, and that wasn't the band starting point. As you know, they graduated to get to that FM radio friendly music, but for me that helped me get into the bands like Yes and Emerson, Lake and Palmer and all those great bands, Jethro Tull. If there wasn't a Pink Floyd, I wouldn't be ready yet, and so Dark Side of the Moon is very important to me, and Us and Them is one of my favorite songs. Still to this day, I don't get bored of it. And one of the things about Pink Floyd, I might not grab this album to put it on, but when it's in my car, I don't change it. It's so familiar, it's so comforting. It's like, it's like a warm blanket. I know where it's going. It's all good, It's so comforting for me to hear something this soothing, so brilliantly done. And still to this day, I'm still blown away that 1973 AD, it sounds better than some of the stuff that comes out in 2022. Amazing production for a time. You have to recognize that it made it timeless because it's so well done. And so, yeah, Dark Side of the Moon, no apology for that. No sorry for me. I think it was the number one album for many, many years for a reason. It's iconic for a reason. But one thing for sure is that this is one of those moments where the band was the band. This is a Pink Floyd album where everybody had their hands in the cookie jar and they all presented. You know what I mean? This is a really team effort. Why we know that started change for them this album on.
Yep. That will make Senor Lewis very happy.
Is that the biggest selling prog rock album in history?
I think so, yeah.
I would think so.
No. Yeah.
More than The Wall, right?
Oh, definitely.
Oh yeah, way more.
And being a single album, it sold more cheaper, right? More.
I mean, I know it held a record for longevity. It was in, it was like in the Billboard top 100, I guess, for like decades.
All the posters that used to come with this thing and everything that came with the book. I had it on album as well, and that was just fantastic. It really, it was one of those things that just like old time radio, people used to make an appointment to listen to a radio program. The Dark Side of the Moon was that you took time out. You don't put the TV on. You don't watch the sports. You just listen to Dark Side of the Moon from start to finish. And it was one of those albums that was that encouraged people that you sit down and listen to start to finish. Like, even though it's a loose concept album, really, it's not really a concept album, but people felt like it was because it's so cohesive from start to finish. From the heartbeat that you heard in side A to the end of the track, before the needle picks up and go away, you hear that heartbeat again. So it made it feel like it's one big song.
Pete's copy still has the weed in the gatefold. Right? Isn't that Pete?
Of course. All right, Stephen, you're number one.
Well, there's been, I think, a surprising lack of crossover between the choices that we've made. But I make no apologies for crossing over again here because we're doing the top five. And I must admit, and we'll come to this more when we do honourable mentions, the list was long when I came to do this year because, as everyone said, 73 is so strong. But I decided to really just cut it down to 10 and go with those 10 and then work out where I wanted to put what I wanted to put. And that was the first thing in place for me. That was everything else then fell in place after that. So yeah, we've all mentioned it. I'm not going to go into it. The track listing's amazing. It sounds fantastic. The band are brilliant. I mean, everyone watching this knows it. I mean, and if you don't, come on. Okay, so yeah, that's my number one.
Cool.
If you don't know it, you shouldn't be watching the show.
Yeah, exactly.
I wasn't going to be quite that far, but yeah, I can't argue with that actually.
Right. All right, Chuck, what do you got?
All right. I'm gonna go to good old Italy for my number one. Probably another polarizing singer in Dimitra Stratos. Areas Arbeit, Mock Fry. You know, what's that? Once again, just another timeless album. You know, you talk about power. You know, this group, at their live peak and so they could rival Mahavishnu Orchestra for their brutality, man. But it's just the fact that they had a superb singer, who died very young in 1979. But you know, every single song on here, the title track, everything on here, just absolutely powerful. It's an amazing band, man. The group Area, just an amazing, Italian band, that don't get mentioned as much as they do in comparison to the top three bands, but you know, I could put these guys right up there with them. My number one is Aria, Arbeit Mock Fry. Is my number one.
Savage band.
Very much so, man. Mm-hmm.
Cool. George, I have a feeling I think I know what your number one is.
Yeah, I think so.
I think so too. I like it.
To do it. Although that I had one of the early CD transfers in 1990.
I had that one too.
There wasn't another issue until 2008.
Yep.
Put out this anthology. The whole album is on there complete from the beginning. Not just a remaster or remix by Mick Gauzinski. It's a really big name in the industry. The single best remaster that I've ever heard. I mean, I'm pretty skeptical of remasters to just jack the volume, but that's not this. You really haven't heard it until you hear this version.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Him of the Seventh Galaxy.
Yep.
Yeah, I think I bought that from Ken like last year, and I'd always seen it, and I was always like, it probably sounds all right. I got the old CD version, just like you were talking about before. And then I think you and I were talking, George, and you're like, you really should get it. It sounds completely different. I was like, all right, I'll give it a shot. Yeah.
Opened up the album.
Yeah. I mean, holy moly. It's night.
Sounds superb.
When that came out, Ken, I was sharing excited messages back and forth with Neil. We were both just like blown away. And he knows that guy, Mick. And he's like, oh man, it's even better than I thought.
Neil being Neil Kernan.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
I love hearing stuff like that. A new discovery.
It's rare. It's very rare that you hear a remaster. Remixes or something. I can't think of any remaster that sounds better.
Oh, just superb. Even the songs that didn't need to be remastered sounds brilliant on that.
Remix is something else. Stephen Wilson, I think, does a nice job. You know, we've talked about it. And and that Returns Forever, nice set.
Yep.
So speaking of remixes, my number one, I'm going to hold up the remix from whatever year this came out. God, 2012. Yeah. Mark's Tongues and Aspic. My favorite King Crimson album.
Same.
And just undeniable for me this year, as great as all my other ones that I mentioned are, and they truly are. But this is like one of those albums that I think I love more and more as every year goes by. I mean, first of all, part one and part two of the title track that bookend the album are so amazing, and they're both so different from each other. And you got Book of Saturday, Exiles, Easy Money, and the Talking Drums sandwiched in between. It's a weird album, not for everybody, but totally for me. Got some of Fripp's great guitar work on here.
David Cross.
Hearing Wetton and Bruford together for the first time, and then Jamie Muir just adds that little icing on the cake. Great album. great album, and really the first of a amazing 3-album run from basically David Cross, of course, can't forget him. A great, subtract Jamie Muir for the next 2 albums, but it's okay. It's still basically the same band. So yeah, that's my number 1. Amazing.
Cool.
All right. We have a few minutes, so we'll let everybody just rattle off some quick honorables. Ken, what do you got?
All right. I'm not holding up anything. I'll just run through my list. From Italy, I had Alpha Taurus. I had Banco del Mutuo Soccorso, Io Sono Nato Libero. Le Orme, Falone e Serona, and Il Rovescio della Medaglia, Contaminazione. That was just from Italy. I mean, think about, I've left others out. Those Festa Mobile. I mean, it was just an amazing year. From other parts of the world, little obscure, Euro-Covistonians Music Society, Wahoo. I don't know if you guys know that, with Yuka Talonen. Great jazz rock album. Ashra Temple, Join In. The first Camel album, self-titled, not the best Camel album.
Quite good.
Pretty damn good album, right? Pretty good. Aruba Luba, I remember that.
Mr. Queen.
Right, great record. Jonesy, Keeping Up. That was a great record. Soft Machine 7.
Yep.
From Embryo, We Keep On was a great Embryo album.
Is this A or B? Just joking.
I had Herbie Hancock, Sexton.
Yeah.
On the list.
Yeah.
I'm sure that'll be Chad's favorite. This one, I don't know if you guys are hip to it. I know Chuck's gonna know this for sure, and maybe Pete. Joe Farrell, Moon Germs. I wasn't sure if I should include that. That might have been a little too much electric jazz.
No, that was awesome. I would have picked that.
Yeah, see, but you didn't, Chuck. You didn't. You had your chance. You fucked up. I had Nectar, Remember the Future.
I had that as well.
And I had Far Out, Niho Jin. Far Out, it's one of my all-time favorite albums, and I put it on honorable mentions because I talked about it already when we were doing Desert Island this. So, and I knocked out anything we've talked about, like Dark Side of the Moon, whatever I had on. So that's what I got.
Cool.
Great.
Eric, you got any honorables that haven't been mentioned already?
I had the Camel, Tall. I think the only thing, PFM, Photos of Ghosts. Blah blah blah, and you guys got me listening to this, so I'm gonna throw it in. Passport, Looking Through.
Oh yeah.
Nice.
What was it Looking Through or Handmade? Was 70?
Looking Through was 73. I think.
I think they released both of them that year, Ken.
Was it both? Okay.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, I had at one point I had Handmade on my list, and somehow it fell off the list.
I thought it was 72.
You could,
I'll check.
maybe that's why I fell off. Because it was 72.
So mine would mention, I have Camera and Brain Salad Surgery, Kim Quintum and Jethro Tull, and Eloy. But I didn't have the other 2. I just want to hats off to the guys. Manfred Mann, Stephen, and Steely Dan, Chuck. I wish I would have thought of those. They were a good one. But that's what I had. Everybody mentioned it.
Cool. Stephen.
All of mine have been mentioned. As I said, I narrowed it down to 10 and I stuck with that because what struck me when I was looking through this is we've already mentioned Genesis. Most of us mentioned that. Ken's already mentioned ELP. Crimson's been mentioned. I mean, my honorables are ELP. There's Jethro Tull. There's Crimson. There's Dark Side of the Moon. I didn't pick up Gentle Giant in a Glass House, but I meant to. That was the 5. Is there another year, and there's been so many great other bands mentioned, but where the real big boys, the ones where you were to say to people, what is prog rock? Well, we're going to start reeling out these kind of bands. We're all on this kind of form. It's unbelievable. It's absolutely unbelievable. And that's what struck me about 1973, is that there's no chaff here. They're all doing something that's really worth mentioning. It's phenomenal.
Yeah, that's how I said that was the watershed year.
Yeah.
You know what? I have a minor theory about why some. I think a lot of it had to do with synthesizers. Use of synthesizers were becoming more prominent. They were also becoming a little more mobile. You had the Mini Moog. I mean, the Mini Moog, I think, came out a little earlier. But bands were able to take that technology and then also take it on the road with them.
Yeah.
Not everybody was like Emerson, using the big modular, mode. It was very, nobody was using that kind of stuff. That's just just an idea that's percolating as to why it all kind of came together around 73.
Yeah, I love hearing stories about carrying around the Mellotron. With some
right.
people dropping
What a pain
in
the ass it was. You couldn't get
Hey,
anytime you mention to an old timer, you mention a Mellotron, a musician, a keyboard player. Oh man, they make a face.
Oh yeah.
They could never keep the damn thing in tune.
That's right. But I also think what you mentioned too is that there was some groundbreaking records that were coming out that pushed the art form to be like that. I mean, Alice Cooper wouldn't have $1 Billion Babies if it wasn't for the Who, Tommy, and Quadrophenia, maybe. Like, people wanted to be more theatrical with the record, and Prog was already doing that. And so I think even the bands like Zeppelin and Black Sabbath, they caught on the Prog bug. It affected their writing around this time. I don't think the song means the same would have been written if Prog bands wasn't making some really interesting impression on the record business. I think it influenced a lot of people to be that creative, even Elton John, for that matter, Funeral for a Friend. It encouraged ELO. I think all of them encouraged them to say, okay, we'll put some pop hits, but in our album, we'll put them epic, because people seem to love the epic that people have been doing that got them so famous.
Yep.
It just struck me as I was going through this list. I mean, could you imagine actually being a guy going into a record store in 1973?
It should
I
be
mean, on
broke.
a weekly basis, you're going home with something that we're calling classics here.
I tell you that much, you wouldn't be married.
Sure.
Right. Well, I personally, everything that I've loved about 1973 has been mentioned, but I'm going to put a little progressive soul into this one. This is one of the finest albums ever recorded, and it has a very progressive feel, not progressive rock, but you could see the progressive feel to it with its themes about the inner city blues, as we call it. It's Stevie Wonder's finest album, Innovisions. I dare anybody to tell me that this album is not progressive in nature. That's the album. If you ever think about a progressive soul album, it's this album. And I would say that it's his finest hour. 9 great songs, that you can think about as progressive as can be. Stevie Wonder, that's my only pick for now. Everything else has been mentioned.
Cool.
Yeah, I thought he was going to say Curtis Mayfield, Superfly, but
Oh, that's 72.
That's why he didn't mention it.
George, you got any left?
They were all called, but Museo Rosenbach,
Mhm.
self-titled Camel, the Banco, and the Genesis.
Mhm.
Cool. Yeah, I think for me, most of mine have already been called. The only ones that haven't, Todd Rundgren, A Wizard, A True Star.
Oh,
Love
yeah.
it. Mhm. Love it.
ELO on the Third day.
Mhm.
Hawkwind, Space Ritual. Again, I didn't want to pick live albums, but that's on there.
Mhm.
Yes, Songs, which has been mentioned. Mahavishnu Orchestra, Between Nothingness and Eternity, which I think is mind-blowingly good.
Yep.
Herbie Hancock, Headhunters. That's it. Yeah. That's it.
Right on.
Yeah, cool. So there you have it, everybody. Our favorite albums from 1973, Prog and Fusion. So down below, please list your favorite Prog and Fusion albums from this year, 1973, top 5, top 10, whatever you want to do. And thanks for watching, and visit us on the web at www.seatranquility.org. We're on Facebook, we're on YouTube, all together.
All the damn time.
That's right. For George Lemay, Rick Labonte, Stephen Reed, Chuck Alvarez, Eric Porter, and Ken Golden, I am Pete Pardo. Good night, everybody. See you next Tuesday here on
Take
In
care.
the Prog Seat. Bye-bye.
Good night, all.